Okay, we're on to Federalist 70. We're now in the unit on the presidency. And in order to learn more about what the founder's vision was for the presidency, we need to look at the Federalist Papers. And so we're looking at Federalist 70, which is Alexander Hamilton who wrote this one. And you're going to need this document in front of you. You either printed it out or I already gave you a copy. It's not very long. I have an excerpt from about a page and a half. And so I want you to highlight, go ahead and highlight as we go, make notes on the margins, just like I do, okay? And so you're going to then take a picture of that and upload it as proof of your completion. All right, remember Federalist 70 is also one of our foundation documents for AP Government. It is document number 7. We'll do a separate short lesson that goes through the actual notes that I want you to take from this. But it's always important to read the original documents in order to really understand what the founders were thinking. All right, so let's start. Federalist 70, Alexander Hamilton. There is an idea, which is not without its advocates, that a vigorous executive, and when he says vigorous, he just means like one that's active. Okay, so let's highlight that and go ahead. So an active executive is inconsistent with the genius of Republican government. So if you have a Republican government and you have an active executive, this is bad because maybe the executive takes over and becomes a dictator. But energy in the executive is a leading character in the definition of good government. So energy meaning again equals active executive equals good government. All right, so so this idea of having energy is good in an executive branch, and then this equals good government. All right, let us continue. It is essential to the protection of the community against foreign attacks. So that's huge, right? I mean, so executive tax community. And this was a real concern back then. I mean, one of the biggest concerns that this new nation had, America, is that another European nations or perhaps the Brits or would come back and they would split the colonies apart or the new states apart and beat them. This is a real legitimate concern. It is not less essential to the steady administration of laws. So there's, that's an important idea of executive. Executive enforce laws, and you want a steady administration of laws, meaning that it's similar across the board. It doesn't go, hey, we're going to ignore some law to be enforced, and we're not going to enforce a law, and suddenly now we're going to really enforce it. You want a steady administration, calm. Everybody knows what it is. It's predictable. In predictable society is one where you can live in calm. And also business can take place and products be produced. And the protection of property against those irregular and high-handed combinations which sometimes interrupt the ordinary course of justice. I love that. So, yeah, let's continue. We'll read what it means. What is this irregular and high-handed combinations? What does that mean? To security of liberty against the enterprises and assaults of ambition, of faction, and of anarchy. So what he's talking about here, this whole little section, is really about protect against anarchy, rebellion. So, an executive is important. But really, that just goes right back to Shays' Rebellion. So you have these people who act like they're doing wonderful political things, and they're just like, well, we have principles, and they're high-handed. And it may be a kind of odd grouping of people, hence irregular. But in reality, they're violating people's liberty. They are breaking people into factions, and they're fracturing the society, and they're creating anarchy. And they're saying a good executive is needed in order to put this down. All right. A feeble executive implies a feeble execution of government. Remember, feeble just means badly run. A feeble execution is another phrase for a bad execution, and government ill executed, whether it may be in theory, must be whatever it may be in theory, must be in practice a bad government. So bad execution equals bad government. Let me just highlight the bad government. Bad or feeble. I'll use the word feeble that he uses. This kind of idea of bad. And the idea here is they want to create a government that's going to be good, that's going to actually have a steady execution of law, that is going to protect against anarchy and chaos. All right. Take it for granted, therefore, that all men of sense will agree in the necessity of an energetic executive. It will only remain to inquire what are the ingredients that constitute this energy. The ingredients which constitute energy in the executive are first, unity. That means like one executive. Secondly, duration. That means how long is the period of their term. And thirdly, an adequate provision for support. And fourthly, competent powers. So here are the ingredients. It's like he's baking a cake. All right. So unity, duration, provision or support, and powers. So you got to give this executive an ability to do good things, to be energetic. And so we'll talk about this idea of unity. There actually was a lot of talk that one way, since an executive is dangerous, look at the monarchy in Britain as an example, since executive is dangerous, therefore, remember the Articles of Confederation had no executive. Therefore, maybe we should have plural executives. And so that's part of this debate that people don't realize at a constitutional convention. There actually was talk about having multiple executives. All right, here we go. The founders have declared in favor of a single executive and a numerous legislature. All right, so we're going to have lots of people in the legislature. We're going to have two houses, but we're going to have a single executive. They have, with great propriety, considered energy as the most necessary qualification of the former. That'd be the executive, and have regarded this as the most applicable to the hand of in power of a single hand, while they have, with equal propriety, considered the latter as best adapted to deliberation and wisdom. All right, so let's look at that. Best adapted to deliberation and wisdom. So wisdom, one executive. More likely to have one executive. Hold on. Equal priority, consider latter the best adaptation to deliberation and wisdom. Wisdom comes from comes from the legislature. So wisdom comes from the legislature. Deliberation means thinking. Okay, that's where you're going to get it from. And the best calculated to conciliate the confidence of the people and to secure their privileges and interests. So that's the what the legislature will give, is that it's best at talking and working out and doing wisdom. But the problem is that it's slow. All right. So there are times you need it. The unity is conducive to energy will not be disputed. Decision, activity, and secrecy and dispatch will generally characterize the proceeding of one man, much more eminent degree than proceedings of any greater number. All right, so now we have the difference. Like why? So we have wisdom that comes from the legislature because they get to talk and yap, but executive, a single one man equals um, decision, activity, secrecy, and these are important when you're talking about war or chaos or some sort of situation that requires action. And so a legislature isn't good for that. And in proportion as the number increases, these qualities be diminished. So anytime you have more than one person making decisions, then all of a sudden the activity, the secrecy, the dispatch means how quickly you act. These things will be diminished. So a Congress with 400 people, not real good about doing those things. Maybe good about wisdom. Maybe they'll come up with a good policy, but not good at acting quickly. But one person, executive, they'll act quickly. That'll be good. Whenever two or more persons are engaged in any common enterprise or pursuit, there's always the danger of a difference of opinion. Okay? They might impede or frustrate the most important measures of government in the most critical emergencies of the state. So, multiple people. I spelled that wrong, huh? Yeah, I got an extra I in there. Multiple people slow down in emergencies. So you need one person in an emergency calling the shots. There's an invasion that happens. There's a hurricane that happens. There's some sort of chaos or rioting or looting happening. Okay, you need someone to act, and a single executive is much better than a deliberative body like a Congress. And what is still worse, they might split the community into the most violent and irreconcilable factions, adhering differently to different individuals who compose a magistrate. So now what we got is if we have multiple presidents, so split the multiple presidents, multiple executives, or multiple executives will divide the community into factions. So if you have, let's say you have three presidents, now all of a sudden, like everybody has their own favorite president, and everyone's saying, "Well, I'm not going to listen to that other president." And then so you just get like this arguing, and now all of a sudden, nothing gets done because of that. In an emergency, that could be literally detrimental to the entire country and to everybody. But one of the weightiest objections to plurality in the executive, in which lies as much against the last as the first plan, it is that it tends to conceal faults and destroys responsibility. So here's the problem. We talk about responsibility. Who to blame if plural executives? So we don't know who to blame. If there's multiple executives, then it conceals the faults and destroys responsibility. Like, okay, something bad happens and there's a group of people that made the decision. Who do you blame exactly? Hard to blame one person. But with a single executive, we all know that person did a crappy job running that war, or they made a bad decision during, whatever the situation was. The multiplication of the executive adds to the difficulty of detection in either case, at who's at fault and who's responsible. It often becomes impossible amidst mutual accusations. There you go. Everybody's blaming each other, right? Pointing the finger at the other people. Mutual accusations to determine whom to blame or punishment of a pernicious measure. So if they commit actual crime, who do you actually, charge? Or a series of pernicious measures ought really to fall. So if something bad happens, or a bad law gets signed, or a bad execution of law, when you have multiple executives, you don't even know who to blame. Where it's easy with the president, we have a single executive. Now we know who to blame. When power, therefore, is placed in the hands of so small a number of men as to admit of their interests and views being easily combined in a common enterprise by an artful leader, it becomes more liable to abuse and even more dangerous when abused than if lodged in the hands of one man. So now they're saying that if you have a small number, one of the leaders, maybe a charismatic leader, might control that group and it's easily combined into a common enterprise by an artful leader. So, like, small group of leaders equals a conspiracy uh, to abuse power. You might even then get a group to abuse power, but you don't really know who the person was that was leading the charge here. But if one man, there's no conspiracy. We know exactly what they're happening. Matter of fact, listen to what Hamilton says. Then it being lodged in the hands of one man, who, from the very circumstances of his being alone, will be more narrowly watched and more readily suspected. Isn't that the truth, though? Because we have one president, doesn't everybody, the other side, the side that disagrees with the president, they're all watching him for every single little misstep. And if they misstep at all, then that president is going to be attacked. I mean, maybe, a lot of times they probably attack stuff they didn't even do. But if you had a group of people, you don't really know. They will be more narrowly watched and more readily suspected, and who cannot unite so great a massive influence as when he is associated with others. So it's much harder for a single person to get a mass of followers and have a group of influence for doing bad things when they are by themselves. Whereas a group could do that because it allows you not to know who actually is doing the bad stuff. So single executive is far more responsible. That's effectively far more effective and far more likely to be held responsible. That is really the argument that Hamilton's making, and single executive wins out. Obviously, that's why we have a president, not the presidents. All right, cool. Go to the other chart, and we're going to take the notes. Thank you.